Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's session we will record, so this will be shared with everyone as a resource from the session. My name is Sarina, and I am the chair of the task force that worked on the resolution adopted in the spring of last year to link evaluation and VNRs with eval partners. And today we'll be hearing from a number of organizations on Uganda's experience and contributions in this area. We'll be hearing from the Office of the Prime Minister, from the World Food Programme, from the FAO, and also the closing remarks will be made by the Commissioner of the Strategic Coordination and Implementation. So welcome to all of our participants, honored delegates, esteemed colleagues, and thank you so much to all of the speakers who will be sharing with us today. The first speaker we'll hear from is Sarah Longford. She's the Deputy Director in the World Food Programme's Office of Evaluation. Sarah has more than 25 years of operational and managerial experience in the humanitarian and development sectors, having worked in policy, program, and logistics for World Food Programme, as well as in humanitarian coordination for the UN Secretariat. Amongst other functions, she oversees national evaluation capacity development within WFP's Office of Evaluation. Over to you, Sarah, for opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and dear colleagues, a huge warm welcome to you, especially to the SDG Secretariat in the Office of the Prime Minister of Uganda. Thank you for joining, and as well as colleagues from Eval Forward, Eval Partners, FAO's Office for the Sustainable Development Goals, and the German Institute for Development Evaluation, Deval. As Sarah said, my name is Sarah Longford, and I work for the Office of Evaluation in the United Nations World Food Programme in Rome. Thank you for joining this crucial conversation on how evidence, specifically evaluative evidence, informs the Voluntary National Reviews, or in short, the VNRs. Today's webinar is part of a series of webinars that Eval Forward, which is a community of practice, plans to do in the build-up to the high-level political forum and after, in collaboration with the presenting countries. But first, just to set the scene, let me take a few steps back to 2015, a big moment when the world agreed on their development vision until 2030, committing to the 17 SDGs. And many of us know this story very well, but what is less understood is that one of the most distinctive features of this developmental vision, Agenda 2030, is its follow-up and review mechanism, which is required to be rigorous, based on evidence, and informed by country-led evaluation. And every year, the 193 countries that subscribed to Agenda 2030 are encouraged to conduct regular, inclusive reviews of their progress and present this update voluntarily in the form of VNRs at the high-level political forum in New York. However, to quote a report from Deval, one of our speakers today, evaluation and other forms of qualitative evidence only play a residual, at best anecdotal role in the majority of VNRs, failing to explain how and why questions and merely touching on the what. To help steer the course, the evaluation community, as Sarah said, advocated for a UN resolution on country-led evaluation of the SDGs to strengthen the VNRs with robust evaluative evidence. The resolution was adopted last year in April and gives a mandate to member states to call for VNRs with a country-led SDG evaluation component. This will be crucial in guiding us to learn lessons from evaluations, highlighting what works and what doesn't as we march towards 2030. In July this year, 43 member states will present VNRs to the high-level political forum, focusing on the following 5 SDGs. SDG 1, low poverty, SDG 13, climate action, SDG 16, Peace, Justice and Strong Institutions, SDG 17, Partnership, and SDG 2, Zero Hunger. That brings us together today. 2 countries, Yemen and Sudan, will present their debut VNRs, while 5 countries are fourth-time presenters. Today, we're going to listen to Uganda, who is equally experienced in the VNR process, presenting their VNRs to HLPF for the 3rd time. Uganda is cited in Deval's report as a good practice example in building a learning culture for the implementation of the 2030 agenda, including through the evaluation of SDG roadmaps. And it's a great honor to learn from the Ugandan experience, specifically in the context of food systems, SDG2 and Zero Hunger. VNRs are indeed not only reports, but are really ongoing processes that involve a multiplicity of stakeholders that come together to discuss progress, to share the challenges, and learn from each other. And that's the spirit of today. We look forward to these discussions, and I thank you all in advance for your participation. And I now hand back to our moderator, Sarina. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I will now give the floor to Pascal Byarugaba, who's been working as a program management and evaluation specialist for the SDG Secretariat at the Office of the Prime Minister in Uganda since 2019. During this time, Pascal has supported the establishment of the National SDG Secretariat and the coordination of the country SDG coordination architecture. Pascal has coordinated the development of the SDG roadmap, the integration of the SDG into the NDP, and provided technical coordination in the 2nd and 3rd Voluntary National Reviews and SDG localization activities, including the Voluntary National Reviews. And I should mention that Uganda is very well recognized for this kind of review at different levels. So thank you so much, Pascal, and we look forward to hearing from your experience.
Thank you very much. I hope my screen can be seen. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody joining us from around the world. I'll just be speaking about Uganda's experience on the VNR and how it is linked to the SDG2, like the previous presenters talked about. Our experience, of course, as Uganda spans from 2016 when we did the first VNR, and then 2020 when we did the 2nd, and then, of course, this year when we are preparing and prepared to present our 3rd VNR in July. I will just talk briefly about the background. My slides are not moving.
Pascal, can you see the slides on the screen?
I can see the slides on the screen. I'm trying to move them. They are not moving.
No, you should indicate to me to move.
Oh.
And I will move.
All right, Nika. Thank you. So you can go to the next slide. Yes, the background has been talked about, and I didn't want to repeat this, but just in summary, as we all know, we have 17 goals, 169 targets, 231 global indicators, and out of these, 201 are applicable to Uganda's context, and currently 127 indicators have data, because what I'm talking about and what I will be presenting is basically to also talk about the data processes and how these data processes inform our VNR and our evaluations, and also link to SDG2. So that's why I'm starting with this as a background. We also have a national SDG coordination framework, and this framework largely brings together all government institutions, but also non-state actors, including the UN, the civil society organizations, private sector, academia, among others. But key to note is that the Secretariat was established in 2019. You will see the blue oval and column. It was established in 2019 basically to support the coordination architecture of SDGs, basically to bring together all the different actors and players work together with government in SDG implementation, monitoring, and reporting. Basically, that is the core function we are trying to strengthen here at the Office of the Prime Minister, but also this coordination framework, as you can see, it also highlights the roles and responsibilities of the different layers of government institutions, including, for instance, the Prime Minister who chairs and heads the different coordination meetings for ministers and heads of corporations and agencies. We also see the SDG Implementation Steering Committee, which is chaired by the head of public service and secretary of cabinet, but also this brings together the heads of institutions, especially government institutions, permanent secretaries, and this meets every month, but we present to them twice a year. Then we have the National SDG Task Force, and this brings together the different technical officers from the ministry, departments, and agencies, plus other institutions, the United Nations, CSOs, private sector, and among others. And it is chaired by the Office of the Prime Minister, the Permanent Secretary, and most importantly, that the 5 working groups, 5 technical working groups, as you can see down, they are the anchor and the core to this coordination framework. So largely, we have a working group that ensures that there is coordination, M1E, and reporting at the Office of the Prime Minister. But you also have to ensure that these SDGs are mainstreamed into the national planning frameworks. So we have a working group chaired by the National Planning Authority. We have a working group to ensure that there are resources that have been mobilized and aligned to SDG interventions. So that working group is chaired by Minister of Finance. We have a very also important group, a working group, data, and it is chaired by Uganda Bureau of Statistics, basically to ensure that the SDG indicators are part of the National Standard Indicator Framework. And there is data produced for the different SDG indicators mainstreamed into the National Statistical System. Then lastly, we have the Communication and Popularization Technical Working Group, basically to localize and ensure that the populace is aware and they are participating in SDG localization activities. So largely, this is the coordination framework, but also we have a post-parliament, which we appraise from time to time on what is going on, because as an accountability institution of government, so we have to appraise Parliament on what is going on in regards to SDGs, including the reports we produce. Next. So in summary, I've talked about the coordination framework. We developed the first SDG roadmap in 2018, and this was in line with our National Development Plan 2. Our National Development Plan 2 was running from 2015 to 2020, and then we developed a new SDG roadmap aligned to our National Development Plan 3, which is from 2021 to 2025. Then we produced our first SDG progress report, 2021, 2022, and we have also produced the midterm report. And this midterm report, which we are just finalizing, it's finalized, but rather informing the VNR. So it's also going to be launched at the same time with our VNR report next week during our SDG conference. So basically, these are some of the processes and products we have been able to produce. And these processes, rather products and reports, are very important as part of the evaluation or monitoring and reporting on the SDGs, because then they generate knowledge. And through that process, definitely we analyze on the challenges, on the progress that we are making and facing in regards to the different 17 SDGs. So that's why I'm trying to show the kind of processes we undertake here to generate knowledge, but also to inform policy and other processes. Then we did our first VNR report in 2016, like I said. We did the second one in 2020, and we are now in the process of finalizing the third report. We shall be submitting it by the deadline on Friday this week. But important to note that we have also piloted the voluntary local reviews in more than 15 districts. We started with Angola. Uganda was among the first 4 countries in Africa that piloted this approach. It's an important global approach, and I know a few countries have adopted it just as a mechanism to support and strengthen localization and self-review at local government levels. So Uganda was lucky to be among the first 4 countries, including Ghana, Zimbabwe, and Cameroon. But we have been also able to scale up this approach in more than 15 local governments, and we plan to do more. These reviews are very, very important for local governments because then what we do, the process we undertake at the national level when we're doing a VNR, means this is the same process that should be taking place at the local government level when they are conducting the VNR. So that's why we are very much taking on this process, and we hope to have all the local governments possibly by 2030 to do self-reviews through this approach. Next. Yes, the first speaker talked about the high-level political forum and the VNR process, which I don't want to repeat, but on the next slide, just to note that in 2023, last year, we came up with a roadmap just to say and to inform us and keep us on track for the activities that we are supposed to undertake from 2023 October up to July when we present our VNR report. But key to note here is that our VNR report, like I said, was informed by the midterm review report, which we had to do to review Uganda's progress for the last 7.5 years since 2015. And this was very, very important in forming our VNR. Then we also had to, of course, we formed the VNR Advisory Committee. This VNR Advisory Committee is CSOs, private sector, and UN academia, basically to ensure that we bring on board every stakeholder, because the VNR is supposed to be worked through a consultative process and everybody must give their views. And given that since 2020, we started developing one report with the civil society organization. So this report is a Uganda's report that has been developed with all the stakeholders, and we are proud that we are now conducting one review and producing one report as Uganda with other non-state actors. Then also, we are prepared to submit the cabinet information paper before we present this report in July, basically to appraise the cabinet on what kind of report we are presenting, the kind of progress we are showcasing on the global stage, and also Parliament. Then we are also conducting an SDG conference. So since 2020, we started organizing SDG conferences annually as part of localizing the SDGs, but also accounting to ourselves as the different stakeholders, government, but also as non-state actors on the progress we are making to reflect on the challenges. So next week, we shall be holding our third SDG conference where we are bringing all local government leaders from across all the local governments to appraise them on these processes, but also to review the local government performance delivery mechanisms, which are very core to achieving the SDGs. Then definitely we shall present our report in July. Next. Of course, some of the stakeholders, they are, like I had said, there are very many stakeholders, including government, the parliament through the Parliamentary Forum on the SDGs, in the Regions Council of Uganda, private sector, the UN, CSOs, young people, and special groups. So all these have been consulted. The general public has been consulted as well through the e-platform. We will see it in the next slide. Next, please. Yes, so this is the e-platform we developed to ensure that there is adequate participation and input from the general public and also the government institutions. So this platform was open to everybody to give their views on what they feel should be addressed moving towards 2030. And I've just put one quote from a lady from Shane, and I just got a quote on SDG2, that assessing Uganda's progress on SDG2, which is zero hunger, involves examining factors such as food security, agricultural productivity, nutrition, among others. Uganda still faces challenges related to food security, including fluctuations in agricultural production. So basically what I'm trying to show you here is that this platform has been very, very helpful to collect views on what people think on the different 17 SDGs. And all these have been considered into our report, and they will definitely inform the next steps, especially after the HLPF in July. We have come up with the plan to address some of these comments, but also to address and attend to the different gaps that have been identified in our report, but also to engage the different actors that that have mandate and are supposed to be working and supporting government on the different SDGs. And next, so on the data processes, briefly, I want just to inform you that Uganda has done a mapping to see which indicators are applicable. I started with that slide where I said 201 indicators are applicable to Uganda, but this is basically how it was done, just looking at all the SDG indicators and mapping to see these are globally computed, these are entire one, these are entire two, but also these are applicable to Uganda. So basically, this is a slide that shows the processes we undertook to arrive on those conclusions that these indicators are applicable to Uganda. Next. So after having that understanding, then we developed what we call the SDG indicator matrix. So the SDG indicator matrix is the one that defines what data source, which source of data or which survey informs which indicator. And then moving forward, we keep populating it and it informs our analysis for all of these reports we produce, including the VNR. Next. Yes, maybe previous. One I didn't put was about the alignment of these indicators to the ministries, departments, and agencies that are responsible. So after the mapping, we also mapped which ministries, departments, and agencies are responsible for which indicators. So that way, they are able to integrate them into their strategic plans for data production and monitoring and reporting for those ministries. So that has been our journey on the data, 41 in 2018, 2019, 92 indicators, 121 in 2022, and now 127. So we hope possibly by end of this year, we should be moving to 140 now that we have even conducted the national census. Next. Yes. So after having that data, this is the kind of analysis we have done. As you can see here, just showing SDG2, the kind and level of analysis we have had to do for us to now have these conclusions that some of the indicators, as you can see that we are saying SDG2 is on track, but it is moderately improving rather, but some of the SDGs indicators are on track, others are moderately improving, others are stagnating, others are decreasing. So this is the kind and level of the analysis we have done to arrive and inform on the conclusions that we have in our VNR. And this involves, of course, working with Uganda Bureau of Statistics, especially on validating the data that we get from the different ministries like Ministry of Agriculture, but also working with Ministry of Agriculture to ensure that we actually have this data, especially administrative data that is produced administratively, not through surveys. So this is the kind of picture I'm trying to shed here. So this second last slide is showing the SDG commitments. As we know, last year there was an SDG summit, and as Uganda, we came up with 6 commitments. And as you can see, we are talking about leaving no one behind. This is a very core component for us and for, of course, for the 2030 agenda. But here we are linking this to the parish development model. And why we are looking at the PDM, because it's just a flagship program for Uganda, especially to ensure that no one is left behind. It's a rich program with 6 pillars, but one of the core pillars, the first one is looking at agro-processing, value addition, and marketing, which is basically talking about food systems. Then we have the recommended pathways to implement all these commitments by 2030. The last one, I think that should be the last slide. Yes, so moving forward, next steps, and conclusion, we note that Uganda's report has been worked through a consultative process and deep analysis for each of the SDGs, including SDG2. We have made an effort to ensure that we give details and we bring on stakeholders and experts that have expert knowledge in the different SDGs to support us in developing this report. I know we received a lot of input from UN agencies on the different SDGs that I am mandated to support, including SDG2. So moving forward after the HLP, one of the activities we want to undertake is to have thematic analysis of the different SDGs. Yes, whereas we have done this VNR report, but it's structurally is not informative enough to allow different actions and accelerated actions on the different SDGs. So what we are planning to do is to do thematic analysis of different SDGs. How is the progress on SDG2, and how does this interlink with the other 16 goals? So that's what we shall be focusing on to do, starting with SDG2 and SDG4. That's why we have already received some interest from some of the UN agencies to support in doing that thematic analysis. So thank you, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Pascal, for sharing that information. For many of the people around the world who are here today, that it's so helpful to understand these mechanisms and tools that have been put in place to achieve everything that's in your roadmap. I'd like to introduce now Gertrude Namayanja. She's a civil servant with over 10 years of experience gained under different portfolios, included but not limited to monitoring and evaluation of government programs, planning, policy analysis, implementation, and coordination. Gertrude has an academic background in economics, policy, planning, and research. She's passionate about a whole of society approach for transformative community development. Thank you so much, Gertrude, for being with us.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the introduction. Like introduced, I'm Namayanja Gertrude, Principal Policy Analyst from the Office of the Prime Minister, specifically working in the Directorate of Strategic Coordination that operationalizes the technical function of the Office of the Prime Minister. And let's move to the next slide. By way of introduction, I'll basically take you through the overview of the presentation. And as the presentation will entail objectives and aspirations of the SDG2, then we'll delve into the SDG2 drivers. Specifically, we'll be looking at the food systems, the multi-sectoral nature, and the outcome. When you look at the SDG2, a critical analysis of the SDG2, you realize that it's more of the food systems, and the outcomes therein are basically nutrition or improved health of all. Then I will look at the why governance and partnerships, where we'll be talking about the coordination architect, the frameworks and tools. Then we'll also tease out some key milestones and opportunities that we have as a country so far, which, according to us, need to be harnessed. Then we'll also look at lessons and next steps. Next. So by way of objective, in terms of SDG2, when we look at the objectives and aspirations, the SDG2 basically focuses on ending hunger, achieving food security, and improving nutrition, but again, promoting sustainable agriculture worldwide by 2030. So specifically, in terms of objective, it encompasses ensuring access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food to meet dietary needs and preferences by all. When you look at all this, actually, at the end of the day, we are looking at the nutrition and the health of all. And specifically, how we're doing this, a little, kindly back. Then also it looks at facilitating all. That is basically looking at the access, all people to have the ability to acquire food that they need without compromising their economic, social, and environmental well-being. Next. So, of course, when you look at the objectives and aspirations, there is no way we can do away with the food systems. So when you look at the drivers in the objectives and aspirations, you find that they are food systems related. And by that means they are multi-sectoral because the systems are housed or are domiciled in different sectors across government, but also having different players that need to be brought on board. And at the end of the day, what are we looking at in terms of the outcome or the impact is basically good nutrition and improved human health. So you realize that from time immemorial, a lot of transformative development has been occurring or taking place, not only in Uganda, but Africa and the world at large. However, this remains characterized by chronically undernourished people, with malnutrition taking a heavy toll across developing and developed nations. So this is evidenced through the prevalence and occurrence or incidence of overweight or obesity among children, adolescents and adults, and as well as prevalence and incidence of stunting and wasting. So the situation is largely explained by socio-economic, political, and cultural aspects, among others. Next. So looking at the drivers, when you do a critical analysis, you see that the drivers in Uganda are basically informed by a high disease burden, poor hygiene, that is when you look at access to water, wash services, and among others, dietary and lifestyle changes as people's incomes increase or decrease. You find that the dietary and lifestyle changes also there is that correlation. Then the negative cultural practices and beliefs, adoption of improved technology for productivity, land tenure, loss of soil biodiversity, and degradation. But again, the issue of political instability characterized by outbreaks of wars and the level of education. But critical among this is also the need for us to look at household incomes in terms of one of the major or underlying drivers. So with that background, you realize that when we look at the SDG2, we realize that the drivers are diverse, domiciled across different ministries, departments of government, and these now bring up the systems. So when you look at the drivers that I highlighted up, you find that there are those that are domiciled in agriculture, those that are domiciled in health, those that are domiciled in water and environment, land, energy, transport, that is connectivity infrastructure. There are those that are gender and social development related. Then there are those that are also labor related, among others. And all these need to be coordinated. There is need for deliberate effort to coordinate all these actors in terms to coordinate these systems for us to be in position of advancing this agenda that is stipulated under the SDG2, whereby we are basically looking at the end of the day having good nutrition and health. So coordination, governance and coordination becomes very critical. A look at this also brings us to the next, whereby we are looking at why governance, then looking at the coordination architect, frameworks and foundations that we have in place. Of course, like indicated earlier on, good nutrition is a key outcome of the improved food systems that are domiciled across the different MDAs or housed in the different MDAs. And this is informed by the nature of the drivers that bring about some of the issues that we have at hand. So you realize that we have a multiplicity of government departments and agencies that need to be coordinated for us to be in position of advancing this particular development agenda. So this calls for, of course, this makes coordination of governance very critical in order to enable us fast track the different actions by the different stakeholders. So implementation, governance and coordination of the diverse stakeholder actions and partnership becomes very critical for strengthening food systems transformation and nutrition. And as we are doing this, we are looking at aspects of policy integration, harmonization, synchronization, coordination across government, and ensuring that we remain relevant to the SDG2 agenda and remain connected and the like. The next slide basically talks of the multi-sectoral coordination architect. Pascal delved so much into this, so I won't be taking you through this, but specifically for this particular SDG, I'll just want to address you to the very first, the bottom, where you see the broken line, the yellow at the national level coordination. You realize that there is need for us, if we are to really accelerate the implementation of SDG2, there is need for us to have dedicated platforms for the different players, partners, especially out of government, the non-state actors. We need to have deliberate platforms for the development partners, for the civil society organizations, for the academia and research, for the private sector, for the media, among others. These platforms we need that deliberate coordination of platforms so that we can coordinate their agendas they are in and ensure that there is that connectedness and cooperation. Next. So what are the coordination frameworks that we have as a country that basically speak to the zero hunger? We look at one, in terms of connectedness, we have the UNAP2, which when you look at the indicators, that is the UNAP2 is the Uganda Nutrition Action Plan 2. This basically is an agenda that provides for advancing nutrition in the country. So it's the planning framework, and when you look at the indicators therein, you find that most of the indicators that we are looking at under the zero hunger are being addressed therein. So this is the kind of the country framework that tries to address itself to the zero hunger. But we also have the draft zero hunger strategy. This was basically a deliberate framework whereby we're looking at actions that need to be fast-tracked in terms of accelerating the zero hunger. That is specific to the SDG2, and that's one thing that we really want. Then we also have the Food Systems Transformation Action Plan. This is something that is it's a draft. So far, we've had the strategic analysis for the food systems transformation. And the efforts under here are basically to inform development of the action plan. So with these three plans, looking at the drafts also like at the intel that is finalized, then those will be the guiding frameworks that at least speak specifically to acceleration of the zero hunger. So with these plans, one, of course, when we have them, there is need for us kindly. Yeah, so we also need to have the monitoring and evaluation and accountability plans for the attendant frameworks that we have in place. With that is a specific meal plan for the SDG2. Then MDA coordination committees, that is to try to ensure that actions, SDG2 related actions, are integrated by the different ministries and departments of government, but also by the non-state actors, that is the development partners and the rest. Then there's also need for us to understand who our stakeholders are by having those stakeholder mapping reports, knowing who is doing what in terms of driving this agenda and where are they, how relevant are they to the actions or to the agenda that we are advancing as a country. Then implementation capacity assessment reports for us to know what our capacities, what our capacity gaps are, where do we have an edge, and what is it that we need to plug in to accelerate implementation for SDG2. I'm specific to SDG2. Next. So in terms of the enabling environment that we have and what it has enabled us in terms of key milestones and opportunities, and we'll look at the policy and institutional foundations. You find that the government of Uganda has put in place basic foundations for accelerating attainment of SDG2 development outcomes. And key among these, you find that, of course, as a country, we've been politically stable over time, and this provides us an opportunity to accelerate and advance this particular agenda. And also, when you look at access to health services, you realize that government, at least for which at each sub-county, we had health center tools, but actually these have been scaled Now they have been scaled to health center 3s. So access to health services is no longer an issue, and that one I'm talking about in terms of access to health services, that is public health services. But when we talk of access to health services generally, including those that are not public, you realize that it's not a challenge. Access in terms of physical infrastructure. Then infrastructure developments, that is the roads and electricity. You find that, of course, there is connectivity across the country. You can move from one region to another. So the issue of access to food really shouldn't be an issue in terms of transportation. The means opening up markets, it shouldn't be an issue, but there is need for us to tease out some of the challenges whereby as a country we have bumper harvests in one region, and then there are issues of hunger in another region. So it's more of an operational issue that needs to be understood, but it couldn't be attributed to infrastructure by way of lack of roads. Kindly, let's return to the previous slide, please. Then access to universal education and skills. You realize that we have the universal primary and secondary education. And for those that have not managed to make it to those levels, the government has deployed a lot of skills development for the boys and the boy and girl child. And these all should be in position of enabling them to have better livelihoods. Then under wealth creation in terms of transformative development, there is the financial inclusion pillar under the parish development model, which basically targets those that are not in the money economy, those that we may call the chronically poor, trying to bring them into active economic interventions and later on graduate them into the money economy. We have also women empowerment programs, we have the youth livelihood programs, and we have social protection related programs. So we are rich in terms of programs or basic foundations that are in place. These need to be understood, studied, understand where the gaps are, and then we just plug in to accelerate development outcomes. Next. So by way of lessons and next steps in terms of accelerating implementation of SDG2, we look at the need for sustainable development and implementation of the development aspirations, including integration of planning frameworks, deliberate policy analysis and formulation, and deliberate policy analysis and formulation, as well as implementation evaluation. Herein, we are looking at those plans, the planning frameworks, the Uganda Nutrition Action Plan, the Zero Hunger Strategy, and the Food Systems Transformation Plans, being in position of helping us advance this agenda. Then we look at a consolidation of the development gains for sustainable outcomes and impacts. Those are the ones I spoke of in terms of the different government interventions that provide opportunities for accelerating implementation of SDG2. Then the deliberate effort to coordinate stakeholder actions. Through the plans, we can be deliberate in terms of coordinating stakeholder actions to foster relevance, coherency, consistency of their actions for impact. And this way we'll be in position of reducing duplication, waste, and the issue of limited impact in terms of advancing this particular agenda. Then there is need to fast track implementation of the flagships. That is the high impact interventions that are in some of these, that are in some of the plans, the Uganda Nutrition Action Plan, the Zero Hunger Strategy, as well as the Food Systems Transformation Plan. There is need for us to identify those high impact interventions that can help us catapult our performance in terms of accelerating SDG2. Then also we look at leveraging from the existing infrastructure to develop on this particular agenda. So in terms of connectedness to the VNR process, you realize that there is need for deliberate efforts to ensure that the SDG2 governance and partnership parameters are well encompassed or are well taken care of, and we are in position of assessing the level to which they are the level to which governance and partnership, the different governance and partnership parameters provide an enabling environment for accelerating implementation of the SDG2 development aspirations. Next. So with that, that brings me to the end of my presentation, and I wish to thank you all.
Thank you so much, Gertrude. There are a couple of questions here. I'll ask you first how you are able to translate your findings at the more global level nationally into plans that might be at different levels, and how that can contribute to improvement. And then the second question is around, given that you are focused on SDG2, how do you connect to other issues? So for example, health, infrastructure, those kinds of things.
You're muted.
Gertrude, we can't hear you yet. It's just muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you for the questions. I'll start with the second question of how, of course, looking at the SDG2, how do we relate this with health and infrastructure? But when you look at the drivers, if we are to really accelerate implementation of SDG2 and ensure zero hunger, that particular end, the impact that we want at the end of that day, there is no way you're going to leave out some of these systems. The drivers that lead us into attaining that particular aspiration involves the need for us to have the health system right, the need for us to have the attendant infrastructure to ensure that we are in position of one, scaling up production, opening up markets, and basically bringing that connectivity whereby we can even have the different populations in the different areas in position of moving from one direction to the other. And how do you do that? Is by providing that enabling infrastructure. So if we are to really accelerate implementation of SDG2, there are those enabling environments that have to be also taken care of. Whereas health is very core in terms of it, but you realize that the enabling health is more or less at the tail end when we look at aspects of malnutrition, because that's now at the tail end. That's more of a symptom of something that's gone wrong. But health remains critical because when people are malnourished, when people are stunted, there is need to address aspects of malnutrition, acute malnutrition in terms of care and cure for curative purposes. Then the second question that related to how do we translate our findings at the global? I just need clarity on that. Is that the question?
So the question was quite specific, talking about your, for example, UNAPs translated into DNAPs, SNAPs, PNAPs, VNAPs, facility action plans. So looking basically at how you take those findings that are at that higher level and translate them into plans that might be applied in different areas.
Okay, now you realize that the UNAP, the Uganda Nutrition Action Plan, is the overarching framework for nutrition programming in the country at the national level. But this framework is also operationalized in the lower local governments, that is at the sub-national level. They have to come up with related frameworks to implement some of the aspirations indicated in the UNAP. So that way you find that the agenda is not only a national agenda that is operationalized at the national level, but also operationalized at the subnational level by way of implementation. What are those actions that the district, local governments, or the subnational level players should be tracking or driving in terms of implementation? So the DNAPs basically inform nutrition related actions that the districts are advancing. But again, these are more of coordination. They are just plans. They provide the overarching framework at the subnational level. And by that means by purposes in terms of governance and coordination with other players, if they are to advance a particular nutrition related issue, that becomes their piece of information. They look at their area as a district. What are our issues in terms of advancing nutrition? What are our indicators like? And by way of cooperation, what should we be focusing on with the partners in terms of improving the nutrition situation in the district, but also in the country as a whole. And this remains the same across board.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Pascal, I wonder if you could also respond to a question. There was a question about looking at, for example, where there are failures or where there are issues that are impacting people differently, either based on geography or the population. So could you address that question either in terms of how to look at where things are or are not working, and also that ability to disaggregate data?
Yeah, thank you. Recently, actually last year, we completed a national assessment on leaving no one behind in partnership with UN Women. And I think this is Uganda should be the first country in Africa to conduct this kind of assessment. And this assessment, we're largely looking at the driving factors, but also identifying the people in the different subgroups and categories under the different SDGs that are left behind or at risk of being left behind, but also the factors contributing to that, in which service areas, of course, looking at issues of policies and so on. So we have this report, and it is being finalized as we speak now, and it should be ready by end of next week. But this analysis has also been done per SDGs and including SDG2. So we have identified all those subcategories and the factors contributing to the current status of risk or being left behind.
Thank you. Thank you. That's great to know. Thank you so much to both Gertrude and Pascal for this very rich information that you've shared. We now give the floor to Sarina Abdysheva. She's the program officer within the Office of the Sustainable Development Goals in FAO. The OSG focuses on capitalizing on FAO's technical expertise, their information and knowledge to identify methods for prototyping and scaling up programs and interventions for SDG acceleration, with a focus on collaboration and transformative partnerships. Welcome, Sarina. Oh, you're just muted.
I apologize. Still happens. Thank you so much, Sarah, for the introduction. I thank colleagues in the evaluation team for this opportunity to contribute. And of course, thanks goes to the government of Uganda for this webinar and for the opportunity also to present from our side. I think we have. I will try to focus on key elements given the time constraints. So thanks again for the presentation, for the opportunity. Office of Sustainable Development Goals, OSG of FAO, is the unit that really works on with the countries and the regions to support in this particular processes. The slide number 1, and thank you, Nicola, for helping with the PPT. So as the previous speakers said, we're expecting on the from 8th to 17th of July 24, there will be a high-level political forum hosted by ECOSOC. One of there will be several SDGs reviewed by the political forum, and among them is SDG2. The theme is to reinforcing 2030 agenda and eradicating poverty in times of multiple crises, the effective delivery of sustainable, resilient, and innovative solutions. And of course, this time we also take into account the emergency situations and the overall crisis in agri-food system transformation. So this is a really critical time to review all these cases. We, at regional level, FAO supports, provides support to respective areas to review these goals in partnership with the UN agencies, specialized agencies, commissions, and FAO offices worldwide. I would like to mention that for SDG2, FAO has hosted an expert group meeting, which is called EGM, on SDG2 on 26th and 27th of March here in Rome. And we, among distinguished experts and speakers, we had 2 experts from Uganda to contribute to the discussion. I also asked Renata to share the link in case if anyone is interested also to review those documents. Next slide, please. So this is the roadmap and the timeline for the 24, which also already Pascal and Gertrude touch upon a little bit. So the process started in October 23, and we are now getting very close to the actual event in New York, and the submission of the VNR report is due in a few days. So this is the timeline that we also wanted to present. Next slide. So the mandate of my particular team is to really capitalize on what FAO is doing. We have so many technical areas within the organization. So everyone is contributing to different SDGs. So OSG is capitalizing on the knowledge and expertise and on what's happening in with SDG goals implementation. We're also working on identifying innovative methods and scaling up programs and to accelerate SDG implementations. We also work on communicating key messages in collaboration with the different partners. Next slide. So the VNRs, we from our side, we also contribute to the regular review of the website on VNRs and advise countries in the processes. So the Voluntary National Reviews, it is advised that the reviews are done regularly, and the process is purely country-led and country-driven. So it really starts from the country with the communication from the government. So we also, I will not also speak about the whole process and what elements it contains because of what previous speakers touched upon. But from FAO side, we in 2024, 38 countries will present VNRs at the high-level political forum, and FAO will particularly supported 33. This is where FAO has country offices, and we provide direct support. Next. So so the role of the regions in the VNRs, and here we have a dedicated page, and we wanted to also include this slide to communicate to present the link, possible link in case of interest, and the role of the regional offices and regions in this particular process is, as we said, the VNRs present opportunity to engage with the national partners and the UN country teams, encourage learning and learning process in the VNR countries. This is also opportunity to review the list of the focal points to see who is involved, and really in the process to capitalize on the knowledge and experience and resources available. Next. We here FAO and OSG support. So out of, as I mentioned in previous slides, so the 38 countries volunteered to present VNRs in 24. OSG, my team, we worked directly with 11 countries so far, and this is the list of countries that we supported directly. Among them, of course, Uganda. What the OSG provides is we provide technical support and help to mobilize financial resources necessary for the VNR. We also help to draft terms of references, draft reports, concept notes, and support with communication, translation, and social media. And of course, we work here with the FAO Statistics Division. So this is the next slides presents the tools and resources available in support of the process. So for VNR preparation, OSG helps to develop e-learning training courses. There's a dedicated pages that provide guidance notes, analytical tools, and the timeline that was presented earlier, that for each step, what are the activities to be involved. And of course, we have technical webinar series of webinars that are also available for the member states and for the users to review. And here's again, there is a link that we can provide here in the comments also later. Thank you. Next. So the frequent challenges observed is that, of course, we already know that quality data is presents a bit of a challenge to collect and to process. So assessing extensive reliable data, which is crucial for positive impact on the quality of the VNR. So this presents a key challenge. Availability of financial resources, this is also a bit challenging, but we try our best to support countries to mobilize as much as needed. Reviewing draft reports, zero draft reports, to ensure they meet the required standards and the accuracy of data, inclusion of the list, available indicators, statistical annexes, etc. So that process also involves, it's quite thorough. We involve different respective divisions and respective different experts to review zero drafts. And sometimes it could be lengthy. So we also try to do it within the timeline. Next. So in conclusion, during the VNR, and also as Gertrude and Pascal mentioned earlier, we look into this for successful realization and production of the VNRs. It is important to review, focus and reflect lessons learned, what happened during the implementation of the SDGs, look into different indicators, targets. The timeline is also critical, is to have sufficient time to follow, to meet the deadlines. Evaluate key transformative elements of the 2030 agenda. Implement a national learning process that incorporates feedback loops to define next steps after the political forum, after the review is taken place, and to take certain follow-up activities. Rely on support from within the UN system, in the country, within the UNCT, involve the UN agencies and the UN Resident Coordinator Office. Use wide and reliable data sources and include assessment of progress towards the goals and analysis of progress towards the goals to put the numbers in perspective and compare them with the baseline or the year when the previous assessment occurred. And of course, in case of Uganda, as mentioned, the previous one was done in 2018. So we will focus on that. I think next, yes, thank you so much. I think I managed to keep it short. Thank you so much, and I will be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarina. And all of the resources that she mentioned are in the chat. So if anybody would like to access those, they're available. And this presentation will be also posted on the Eval Forward website for anybody that would like to access that. And now we will listen to Dirk Hoffman, who is an evaluator with the German Institute for Development Evaluation, Deval. He is part of the evaluation capacity development team and works in Latin America and Africa. His expertise encompasses climate change and the SDGs, protected area management, and international climate policy. And Deval has been quite instrumental in creating a number of resources supporting countries that are interested in evaluating SDGs. So welcome, Dirk.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for this kind introduction. Good afternoon to everyone, and a special thank you to the organizers for having me here. I'm honored to be here at this important event. Not losing much time, we go straight to the presentation. I'd like to share a few insights with you from a report on the integration of SDG evaluations and VNR reporting. It's a report conducted in Latin America and Anglophone Africa. Next, please. So we've all heard this, we all know this. The 2030 agenda was formally adopted in 2015. We have 17 sustainable development goals, but we also have a mechanism for review that has been established, and we've heard much about the VNRs. Next, please. But then when we go to last year's SDG summit in September, or if we look at the UN Secretary General's report, other reports by scientific research institutes, we notice that most SDGs are not on track. And we also notice there's an annual SDG funding gap that is growing. So from all the monitoring and reporting effort, we know that we are in trouble. Next, please. So this is why we think we need to go beyond monitoring, we need to go beyond the indicators. We have to understand why we are where we are. Why didn't we get, in many cases, as far as we had wished to go, as governments had postulated? What we can see is since the adoption of the 2030 agenda, most countries in the world have included the SDGs in their national development planning. But we can also see that despite these efforts, the approach has oftentimes not been operationalized in guidance, discussion, statements, and analysis of VNRs. We can still see that VNR reporting is heavily centered on monitoring. And while we think that monitoring is extremely important, we notice that there is very little relation in reference to evaluation. Next, please. So we're lucky that last year we had this UN resolution that Sarah Farina talked about in the beginning already, where she had been heading the task force. And this, I think, is a resolution that has not been taken up enough by countries. It is, I think, extremely important as it is linking country-led SDG evaluation with VNR reporting. It is 2 or 3 pages. I recommend you go to the page and read it. It's not long, but just 3 points. It encourages all member states to present regular voluntary national reviews with country-led evaluation component. So it's not either or, it's including country-led evaluation components. It again encourages all member states to use evidence from evaluations of the Sustainable Development Goals implementation for decision-making and reporting on their progress towards achieving the 2030 agenda. We think that evaluation can be the link of data, of monitoring exercises to policy making. Data does not go directly into policy making in many cases. So we think that evaluation can play a key role here. The resolution requests UN agencies to provide support and request of member states, obviously, on their support to undertake evaluation of the implementation of the SDGs. Next, please. So for anyone interested, there is an SDG evaluation guidebook, Evaluation to Connect National Priorities with the SDGs, that has been put together by some institutions, but you can find the logos below on the left-hand side. And it is interestingly informed by emerging national practice. So it's informed by SDG evaluations from Finland, Nigeria, and Costa Rica. Interestingly, from 3 different continents. So there's a bit in it from different perspectives and different sides. It offers guidance, ideas, and examples that country can use and design to implement their own evaluations of the SDGs. And with the participation of Deval, my own organization, the German Institute for Development Evaluation, we are now in the process of putting together a 2nd edition with additional insights and additional country cases that should be available in the 2nd half of this year. We could have another webinar on SDG evaluation, but we'll go back to VNRs and to see how we can link them. Next, please. You have a slide which will not go through in much detail. You'll have the presentation with you after the event, but just basically saying that VNRs, they measure and report on national progress towards achieving the SDGs, and they report on indicators against targets, very basically put. And country-led evaluations examine and help answer why targets are achieved or why targets are not achieved. This very much in a nutshell. Next, please. In order to address this missing link between many of the VNRs and many of the activities in the evaluation sector, like 2 years ago, we commissioned a study on VNRs and SDG evaluations in Anglophone Africa and Latin America. Here you have the links, and there's also a policy brief on the issue. Just a few elements from the study. Next, please. Fine. What was our aim? We were a team from someone from Clear AA in Africa, someone from Clear LAC in Latin America, and myself from a German institution. So we had 3 perspectives, 3 continents, commissioned the study. We had an excellent team of evaluators with the aim to contribute to the discussion on the role of evaluation and the SDG reporting. And this was before the resolution, the UN resolution came out. The idea was to inform and provide inputs to global and regional knowledge sharing among key stakeholders, provide data and analysis to inform further action to advocate for the improved reporting requirements at the global level, the VNR guidelines. Next, please. You can see the countries, Latin American countries on the left-hand side, 4 that had been involved, 4 countries that we looked at more closely in. On the African side, Uganda was one of the countries, specifically impressive, the roadmap development of Uganda and the dedication within the government system to really have an SDG architecture in place. Next, please. The content was to assess SDG evaluation evidence when measuring progress vis-à-vis achieving the 17 SDGs, the identification of emerging lessons and good practices. And that, I think, is a very interesting section of the study with interesting examples that probably in many cases have moved beyond what has been stated. Again, as I said, this is something we did 2 years ago. And aim of the study also presentation of findings of the research as in an event like today. Next, please. Very briefly, coming to the conclusions. While all countries mapped for the analysis have integrated SDGs in their national planning, only limited progress has been made to ensure that SDGs are taken as key references for sector-level planning. So we're staying on the national level, basically. We've heard interesting examples from Uganda moving to the local level. And I think this is really something extremely important to not just stay on the national level, go to the sectoral level and also move to the local level. So congratulations on that step. There is a profound need to raise awareness as well as a common language on what SDG evaluation entails. What is an SDG evaluation? Since there's a concentration of efforts on data-driven monitoring of the SDGs, which has led to a shortage of time and resources to invest in building the necessary conceptual and methodological ground for SDG evaluation. So we think it's not either or, but SDG evaluation is lagging behind. Coming to the last slide. Very succinct policy recommendations from the study for governments. Integrate the SDGs and their indicators into public policy making and planning system. And again, this is for national level, but it must not stop necessarily. We can move to local level as deemed appropriate by countries. For parliaments, enact legislation or regulations that promote the mandatory evaluation of public policies and development plans within the 2030 agenda. For the African context, we also have the 2063 agenda, can also be included. For evaluation stakeholders, the recommendation goes to advocate for greater participation in VNR development processes. We see a disconnect. For the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, UNDESA, take up VNR development guidelines and bring in evaluation. Lastly, ECD institutions and development partners should augment their capacity building activities in that sense to enable capacities for SDG evaluations. So with that, thank you very much. And back to you, moderator.
Thank you so much, Dirk. We have now heard from quite a few speakers who really embodied what it actually calls for in the resolution. So as Dirk mentioned, there are basically 3 calls to action for governments, including presenting regular VNRs with a country-led evaluation component, using the VNR process to track not only the SDGs, but also to ensure that no one is left behind, and to use evidence from evaluations of the SDG implementation and decision-making and reporting on their progress. There's also a call for UN agencies, which we also see reflected here in some of the commitments that Sarina talked about. So the request there in the resolution is to provide to UN agencies is to provide support at the request of member states on their efforts to undertake evaluations of the implementation of SDGs and to facilitate the exchange of experience and knowledge products. So we have a few moments here for questions. And so I just wanted to begin. There are a couple of questions in the chat that I will follow up on, but I just wanted to ask, given the theme of today's event, either Pascal or Gertrude, if you would like to respond to this question of how do we make that link? There is a bit of a missing piece at times between evidence that comes from evaluation and that VNR process, especially when you're dealing with statistical systems. But both of you have talked about how you've both disaggregated data, but also looked at quite an engaged stakeholder process. So if either of you can help to talk about how the use of evaluation can also bring some value to VNRs and how that might be done, that would be wonderful. Either Pascal or Gertrude. Sorry, I know I asked both of you. That might be hard to decide who's answering.
So I'm online.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay. Yes. Okay, thank you. So these evaluations are very important because when you look at the VNR, as countries prepare these reports, we are usually required to, one, use official statistics. And official statistics usually, currently, I think mainly there are two sources of official statistics, largely administrative data from different ministries, departments, and agencies, especially for the case of Uganda, but also through surveys conducted by different ministries, but also through the National Statistical Institution, Uganda Bureau of Statistics. So most of these surveys are the ones that actually inform our SDG indicator matrix. And you just saw when I was presenting, you were able to see like Uganda National Household Survey. So most of these evaluations and most of those surveys are the ones that inform the official statistics that we use in our SDG progress reports, but also the VNR. So these evaluations are only that. We also appreciate that the evaluation is conducted by the different non-state actors and development partners. And there are also efforts, for instance, in Uganda, to start considering some of the data from those generated through those evaluations and reports. And we have also adopted, as such, we have developed and adopted the citizen-generated data guidelines and Uganda Bureau of Statistics, largely to see how some of those evaluations that are not conducted by government can be adopted, especially the official statistics, but to be part and inform the VNR. So that's what I can respond for the case of Uganda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gertrude, you'd like to add something?
Thank you very much. Pascal has exhausted, but specifically for those evaluations that are basically undertaken by non-state actors, the issue is basically, most times the issue is about the processes and procedures and how do they work with the Uganda Bureau of Statistics to ensure that the evaluations are recognized. So it's more of a procedure and processes, methodologies for us to really be in position of recognizing them. But also the other thing relates with the use. In this, how do these evaluations address our issues as potential users? So if only we could make sure that some of these evaluations are utilization based in terms of us as government being in position of taking up some of those actions, whereby the researcher is very specific in terms of what government should be undertaking in terms of the findings and recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see a few more questions, but I also know that we are out of time and I want to respect everyone's ability to participate today. So I would invite responses in the chat as well. Dirk, for example, there's a question specifically for you, and I believe this would be quite an important question for people to hear your response to, if you wouldn't mind to add that in the chat. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Edward Walugembe for his closing remarks. Frederick Edward Walugembe is currently serving as the Commissioner, Strategic Coordination and Implementation at the Office of the Prime Minister in Uganda. In his current position, he is responsible for strengthening the institutional framework for the coordination of policy and program implementation across the government. His role is to ensure connectedness, continuity, and communication of government business for socioeconomic transformation. Prior to joining the Office of the Prime Minister, he was the Commissioner Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation at the Ministry of Public Service, Uganda, from 2013 to 2021. His dedication to evidence-based systems has contributed to the establishment and management of robust monitoring and evaluation frameworks in Uganda. Mr. Walugembe, the floor is yours for closing remarks.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good morning, from wherever you are. I would like to thank you for participating in this webinar, which has been insightful and productive. I'd like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to all of you for your active participation and engagement. The discussions have been both enlightening and encouraging as we reviewed Uganda's VNR for SDG2 and have shared valuable experiences and lessons. Our journey towards achieving the SDG, particularly SDG2, which focuses on ending hunger, achieving food security, improving nutrition, and promoting sustainable agriculture, is a collective effort. In fact, when we talk about ending hunger, we need also to talk about the safety of the food that we eat. We emphasize food security and food safety, and we also look at the indirect issues that we face, the non-nutritious food that we need also to get out of the way. So the insights shared today underscore the importance of multi-stakeholder partnerships and robust governance frameworks in accelerating our progress. In ending hunger, we know very well that all of us, and I thank you all for participating. We have various stakeholders from various fields, various players, stakeholders, and we know that the stakeholders, the variety here, help us to achieve our goal in ending hunger. And I want to emphasize the fact that we can only end hunger if we work together. While we are looking at SDG2, I also want to emphasize SDG17, among all others, that partnerships for the goals. So let us continue to partner together in discussions, in actions, in sharing lessons and learning from one another to achieve the objectives that we intend to achieve. So we shall achieve goal number 2, SDG goal number 2, among others, by working together. We intend to work together. We break the silos and continue to work together to achieve that. And I'm sure that the partnership for development, the partnership for the goals has got to be emphasized here. So let us all be aware of our roles and you combine them together and achieve the objectives that we intend to achieve. I'd like to thank our distinguished speakers, the discussion that you've been having, all of you, the moderator. I want to thank you for effectively having this wonderful discussion. And it's my prayer that the outcomes from this webinar be taken into action. Let's move away from words to action. Let's act on what we've said. Let's learn and take forward these recommendations for the betterment of humanity, for the sake of ending hunger. So the collaborative spirit witnessed today is a testament to the commitment of all stakeholders, from government officials, civil society, the UN agency, and evaluation professionals, among all others. I can't mention all of you, but we know the variety that is here. And we want to thank you for your dedication to monitoring and evaluating, reporting, disseminating advancements towards SDG2, and also for the continued implementation, because that is very important. And this requires us again to cross-check and check ourselves. So from the lessons that we've got from this webinar, let us take them forward, discover action points, and all of us from our positions and within our means, make sure that we upscale this, we address the challenges that have been identified. And I want to make particular mention of the area that we've been talking about as we are closing, among the questions that you raised, the issue of evidence-based, the quality of data. This has got to be emphasized, because once we don't have quality data and statistics, then we may misdiagnose and misprescribe and then we may not end hunger. Instead, we may exacerbate the situation. So as we move forward, let us use quality statistics, quality data to inform our decisions so that the decisions we make and efforts we take forward are fit for purpose. The contrary would just cause more problems. So let's continue to work together. As I said, SDG 17, to partner together. Let's leverage our collective strengths to ensure that everyone has access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food. Our shared vision of a world free from hunger and malnutrition is within reach if we continue working together. And with unwavering determination, we can make it a reality. I invite all of us to continue working together, to continue identifying problems, and then get collective solutions to take this forward. So thank you once again for your participation. I look forward to your continued participation and collaboration, and to see that we get tangible impacts. And I hope and pray that the webinar and the VNR and the lessons that we've got will take us forward in this area. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Walugembe. Thank you very much to all the speakers, the participants, and the organizers of today's events. For any resources, please look at the Eval Forward website. And we look forward to future collaboration as everyone here is contributing to achieving the SDGs and to finding a role for evaluation and supporting that. So thank you again, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.